Hi, I'm Mari. At my in-laws' anniversary party, my little girl spilled a glass of water, and my father-in-law slapped her so hard she cried. In front of everyone, he called her trash. And my husband, he told me to take her and leave, like we didn't belong there. I walked out, humiliated and shaking, thinking that was the end of it. But when they got home, there were 59 missed calls. What could they possibly want now, after doing that? I had rehearsed my smile in the car before walking in. That brittle, polite expression that said, "I'm grateful to be here," even though I knew every person in that ballroom was looking down their nose at me. The country club smelled of cinnamon and pine. Someone had gone all out decorating for Sterling and Evelina's anniversary. It looked like a winter wonderland, but one that didn't belong to me. Izzy clung to my hand, her little fingers cold even through the lace gloves I'd bought her. "Mom, do I have to stay next to Grandpa?" she whispered as we stepped through the doors. Her big brown eyes darted nervously to the front of the room where Sterling was holding court, laughing his booming laugh with a circle of business friends who dressed like they walked straight off the pages of a magazine. "Just smile, sweetheart," I murmured, kneeling briefly to straighten the bow on her dress. "We'll be in and out. You'll be fine." I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince, her or myself. Nolan was already inside, nursing a drink, blending effortlessly into this world of wealth and legacy. He didn't even glance our way when we arrived. I told myself it was because he hadn't seen us, but deep down I knew better. He always saw them first. Always them. Never us. The speeches dragged on. Toasts were made. I tried to keep my posture perfect as Evelina, in her understated pearls, gave me that look. Half pity, half disapproval, every time my daughter shifted in her seat. Then it happened. The moment that shattered whatever thin layer of belonging I'd managed to fake. Izzy reached for her water glass, nervous and fidgety like any child would be at a formal party surrounded by strangers. Her sleeve caught it, and the glass tipped. Ice water cascaded across the table, splashing onto Sterling's immaculate suit. For half a second, there was silence. Then Sterling's hand connected with her cheek so fast I didn't even process it at first. The sound echoed louder than the clinking of crystal or the soft hum of the string quartet. "You little trash!" he roared, his face red, veins bulging in his neck. "Get out! Both of you! Out of my sight!" My ears rang. I froze. Every pair of eyes in that room turned to us. Whispers flitted through the crowd like wildfire. Izzy's lip trembled, and tears spilled down her face as she clutched at my arm. I opened my mouth, something, anything. But before I could speak, Nolan was there. Not at my side. Not shielding his daughter. No. He was at Sterling's, hand on his father's arm, his voice sharp, but not for him. For me. "You don't belong here, Mari. Take her and leave," he barked, like I was an intruder who'd crashed their perfect evening. I swear my heart physically broke in that moment. I gathered Izzy, numb, hearing nothing but the blood rushing in my ears. Evelina stayed seated, silent, her eyes fixed on the table, like if she didn't look up, none of it had happened. I could feel the stares, the murmurs. I always knew she wasn't a good fit. No class. What did she expect marrying into this family? My legs moved on autopilot. Out of the ballroom, down the long hallway lined with oil paintings of people who thought too highly of themselves, through the grand doors and into the biting Boston winter. The air hit my face like a slap of its own. I held Izzy tight, her sobs muffled against my coat as my heels crunched across the icy pavement toward my car. My fingers shook so badly I fumbled with the keys twice before getting the door open. I didn't cry. Not yet. My humiliation was too raw, my shock too deep. But one word kept playing in my head like a broken record. Trash. That's what he called my baby. That's what my husband let him call her. As I buckled Izzy in, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A single missed call from an unknown number lit up the screen. I stared at it for a moment, dazed. By the time I got home, that single missed call had turned into 23. By the time I parked outside my apartment, the snow had thickened, muffling the world into an eerie silence, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the whole city is holding its breath. I sat in the driver's seat for a long minute, watching my breath cloud the windshield, trying to collect myself. Izzy had fallen asleep in the back, her tear-streaked face pressed against her coat collar, the stuffed unicorn she'd brought from home still clutched in her arms. Carefully, I carried her upstairs, her small weight heavy against my shoulder, like carrying my own shame. Inside, our apartment felt too still, the heat barely keeping up with the draft sneaking through the old window frames. I tucked Izzy into bed, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and kissed her damp forehead. She stirred, but didn't wake. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket again. I didn't want to look. A part of me hoped it was someone else, anyone else, but deep down, I already knew. I finally pulled it out. 59 missed calls. Nolan, Sterling, Evelina, even the house number from their mansion. My chest tightened, and a bitter taste rose in my mouth. I set the phone on the counter and stared at it, like it might stop if I just didn't touch it. But the voicemail icon blinked insistently. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. The first was Nolan. His voice was clipped, rehearsed almost. "Mari, you need to pick up. Dad says this can be fixed, but only if you come back. Tonight. Don't make this worse than it has to be." Fixed? That's what he called slapping an 8-year-old across the face in front of a room full of strangers? My hand tightened around the phone. The next message was Evelina's. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind that sticks to your skin but leaves you cold. "Mari, you embarrassed this family tonight. If you don't want things to get worse for you, answer your husband's calls. We can help you, but only if you start acting like part of this family." I froze. Worse for me. Not for Sterling, not for Nolan, for me. She didn't even have the courage to say it outright, but I heard it anyway. Trash. That word again. The word Sterling spat at my daughter. And now Evelina wrapped it in politeness. But it was the same poison. I scrolled through the rest of the messages. Some were Nolan sounding increasingly angry. Some were Sterling, his booming voice leaving clipped orders. "Pick up the phone! This is your last chance to make this right!" As if I'd been the one who needed forgiving. My hand shook as I set the phone down. I paced the kitchen, the old linoleum creaking under my feet. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to cry. But instead, I sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the cheap light fixture above me, letting the anger spread through my chest like wildfire. They really thought they could drag us through hell, then make me crawl back for the privilege of being humiliated again. They thought I'd swallow it, that I'd keep my head down because that's what I'd always done. I walked back to Izzy's room and watched her sleep. Her cheek was still pink where Sterling's hand had landed. I pressed my lips together so hard they hurt. "They're not going to call you trash and get away with it," I whispered to her, though she couldn't hear me. Back in the kitchen, I picked up the phone. One by one, I deleted every voicemail. I wasn't going to let their voices live in my head rent-free. When the inbox was empty, I opened my laptop, the screen casting a pale glow over the dark kitchen. "If they want war," I murmured, fingers poised over the keys. "They'll get it." But first, I needed to remember exactly how we got here. Every insult, every dismissal, every red flag I ignored. The apartment was still except for the steady tick of the kitchen clock. Izzy's soft breathing carried faintly from her room, a rhythm that reminded me she was safe for now. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, the screen's glow cutting through the dark. My hands hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type. I just stared at the folders, the emails, the memories I'd tucked away like they were someone else's problem. I remembered that first Thanksgiving at the Harrisons' mansion. It had been my introduction to Nolan's world, Sterling's world. I'd spent days planning what to wear, something that would make me look like I belonged in their marble and crystal kind of life. The moment I walked into the dining room, Sterling's gaze swept over me like I was some exhibit that didn't quite meet the standard. Later that evening, over pumpkin pie, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Some people really do make the jump from trailer parks to country clubs these days." The room erupted in laughter. Everyone, even Nolan, chuckled like it was harmless fun. I remember staring at my plate, willing myself not to cry, thinking, "It's just a joke, don't make a scene." But I heard it for what it was, a reminder. I wasn't one of them. My hand trembled as I opened my messages, scrolling until I found that old text thread. I'd kept it, though I never really knew why. Maybe because deep down I wanted proof I wasn't imagining it. I'd written to Nolan after another dinner where Sterling had teased me about my education, about my ambition being cute. "Why do you let him talk to me like that?" I'd typed. His reply had come hours later. "That's just how my dad is. Don't take it personally." I read those words again now, feeling that familiar sting. Don't take it personally. That had been his mantra for years. Don't take it personally when Sterling interrupted me mid-sentence to make a condescending remark. Don't take it personally when Evelina pretended not to hear me at family brunches. Don't take it personally when I was treated like an accessory to Nolan instead of his wife. But I had taken it personally. Every single time. I'd just buried it deep because I wanted to keep the peace. Because I'd convinced myself that being part of their family, even if I was on the margins, was better than being completely on the outside. I closed my eyes and let those memories wash over me. The awkward silences, the quiet digs disguised as humor, the way Nolan always smoothed things over with, "That's just Dad." How many times had I let them make me small? How many times had I told myself it didn't matter, that as long as Izzy was happy, I could handle the rest? But last night, they crossed a line. That word Sterling spat at my daughter, trash, wasn't new. He'd used it before, dressed up in politeness, wrapped in laughter, but it had always been there. Trailer trash, charity case, lucky to be here. The message was always the same. I didn't belong, and now he'd branded my child with it. A bitter laugh escaped me, sharp and ugly in the quiet kitchen. I'd spent years twisting myself into knots, trying to fit into a family that never wanted me there. And for what? So they could humiliate my daughter the same way they humiliated me? No. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Harrisons. I'd started it a long time ago. Little things I'd saved here and there. Screenshots of emails where Sterling berated staff. Photos from events where Nolan stood beside me but looked like he wasn't with me at all. Documents I'd come across that made me wonder just how clean their empire really was. I hadn't known then what I'd use it for, but I'd known enough to keep it. I stared at the files, my pulse steadying for the first time all night. I might not belong in their world, but I didn't need to. I was done being their quiet outsider. And just like that, my humiliation turned into my greatest weapon. The kitchen looked like a battlefield. Papers were scattered across the table, coffee I'd brewed hours ago sat cold in its mug, and my laptop glowed with the eerie light of a screen that hadn't been idle all night. It was almost dawn, and I hadn't slept. Not that I wanted to. The exhaustion in my bones felt different. This wasn't defeat. It was something sharper, more focused. I pressed play on the voicemail again, Sterling's voice filling the room. "Trash," he spat, like it was a fact, like it was our name. I didn't flinch this time. I saved the file, labeling it clearly. Voicemail. Evidence. If he thought he could humiliate me into silence, he hadn't counted on me documenting every shred of his ugliness. My phone buzzed on the table. David. David wasn't just a friend. He was a paralegal who had spent enough time around my life to know the Harrisons weren't just difficult. He was one of the few people I trusted completely. I texted him earlier in the night, a short message. "Call me when you can. It's serious." I swiped to answer. "Hey," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "What's going on?" His tone was cautious but concerned. I didn't sugarcoat it. Sterling hit Izzy at their anniversary party, in front of everyone. There was silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "Mari, are you kidding me? That's not just—" "I'm not exaggerating. He slapped her across the face because she spilled water on his suit. Oh my God." He sounded angrier than I'd heard him in years. "Do you realize that's child abuse? There's no family squabble excuse that covers this. That's a crime." "He did it in public? There were witnesses?" "Yes, a whole room of them. And Nolan." My voice wavered despite myself. "He told me to leave, like it was my fault." "Mari," David said slowly, "this isn't just about you anymore. They put hands on your kid. You can't let that slide." I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in his words. Hearing it put that way, child abuse, shifted something. It wasn't just humiliation, it was criminal. "You need to document everything," he continued. "Write down exactly what happened. Save all messages, voicemails, everything. If this goes to court, you want it airtight." "I've been saving for years," I admitted quietly. There was a pause. "Then it's time to use it. But you need to be careful. They're powerful, Mari. People like Sterling. They don't play fair." "Neither do I," said, before I could stop myself. We spoke for a while longer, mapping out next steps. Things I needed to gather, people I might need to call. When I hung up, the sun was still an hour from rising. I opened a blank email, my fingers poised over the keys. For years, I'd been reactive, defending myself when cornered, apologizing when they demanded it. That ended now. The email I wrote wasn't long. "Nolan, Sterling, Evelina. You will hear from me through proper channels. Do not contact me directly again. Mari, no explanations, no emotions, just a line in the sand." I read it twice, then hit send. It felt like slipping out of a pair of too tight shoes I'd worn for years. The phone buzzed again, and I played another voicemail. Evelina this time, her voice syrupy sweet with venom underneath. "You embarrassed this family tonight. If you don't want things to get worse for you, answer your husband's calls." I stared at the phone, letting her words echo in my mind. Trash, embarrassment, worse for you. They thought they still had power over me. I saved that voicemail too. Evidence. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about reclaiming control. About making sure Izzy never grew up believing this treatment was normal. As I gathered files from the Harrison folder, documents about their business dealings, screenshots of shady emails, recordings of Sterling berating employees, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. I wasn't just surviving them anymore. I was preparing to dismantle the empire they'd built on intimidation and entitlement. My phone lit up again, this time with a text from David. "If you're serious about this, you need to see what I just found in the city records about Sterling's company. Call me ASAP." My hands tightened around the phone. Whatever he'd found, it was big. By sunrise, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my dignity. I was about to expose an empire. That thought carried me through the morning as I dropped Izzy off with Mrs. Kearns, the sweet retiree down the hall who'd always offered to watch her when I needed help. I told Izzy I'd be back soon, and forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The drive to the Harrisons' house felt longer than it should have. The winter sun was already dipping when I pulled up to their mansion, its stone facade glowing like some cathedral of power. I hated that even now, the sheer size of it made me feel small. Nolan opened the door before I could knock, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, blocking the entryway like I was some solicitor. I pushed past him. Too bad. The air inside smelled of polished wood and old money. Evelina stood at the edge of the grand foyer, hands clasped in front of her as though she'd been waiting. Sterling was seated near the fireplace, perfectly comfortable, sipping what looked like brandy. He didn't stand when I walked in. "You've got some nerve," Sterling said, voice dripping with disdain. I ignored the bait. "I'm here because what happened at that party was unacceptable. You hit my daughter in front of a room full of people. You humiliated her. You humiliated me. And you think I'll just let that go?" He chuckled, a slow, deliberate sound that made my skin crawl. "You came all the way here for this? To whine? Sue me if that makes you feel better. No court will believe a woman like you over me." A woman like me. It landed exactly how he meant it to. Nolan stepped forward, his tone suddenly sharp. "Mari, stop. You're being dramatic. You're turning this into something it's not." I turned to him, stunned. "She's 8, Nolan. Your father slapped our 8-year-old, and you're defending him?" "Don't twist my words," he snapped, glancing nervously at his parents. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Dad didn't mean to call her trash? Didn't mean to hit her across the face?" My voice was rising despite my best efforts. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Nolan. It's abuse." Evelina shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing, her silence sealing her complicity. Sterling leaned back in his chair like a king on his throne. "That little trash needs to learn respect. And so do you." The words hit me like a slap. Not because they surprised me, I'd heard them before, but because he said them so casually, as though my daughter's worthlessness was simply a fact to him. I locked his tone and phrasing into memory. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. "This is your last chance to apologize. To my daughter, to me. Otherwise, the next time you hear from me, it'll be through my lawyer." Sterling threw his head back and laughed. "Go ahead. Waste your money." I looked at Nolan one last time, hoping for anything, a flicker of shame, a hint of support, but all I saw was his jaw tightening as he muttered, "You're unstable, Mari. You need help." That was it. I'd been dismissed, minimized, and gaslit by the people who claimed to be my family. I didn't give them the satisfaction of tears. I turned and walked out, my heels clicking against the marble like gunshots in the silent house. The cold evening air hit me as I stepped into the driveway. I'd barely made it to my car when Nolan followed. He grabbed my arm, his grip firm enough to leave a mark. "If you try to ruin my family," he hissed, his breath visible in the chill, "you'll regret it." I stared at him, my silence deliberate, my stillness heavier than any words I could muster. I got into my car, closed the door, and started the engine. As I drove away, I didn't look back. On the drive home, I realized regret wasn't the thing I feared anymore. It was becoming them, and that's why I had to destroy them differently. That thought echoed in my head as I pulled into my driveway, the rain turning into a steady downpour. By the time I got inside, I was drenched, my coat heavy with water, my resolve just as weighted. Izzy was asleep in her room, clutching her rabbit, the same one she'd been holding the night Sterling struck her. I tucked the blanket around her shoulders, pausing for a moment to watch her breathe. She looked so small, so untouched by the storm swirling outside these walls. I wished I could keep it that way. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee, though I knew I wouldn't finish it. The clock ticked, loud and unforgiving. The house felt cavernous, even though it was barely more than a 2-bedroom apartment. That's what despair does. It stretches the walls around you, making every room feel too big for one person. That's when I saw it. A thick envelope on the table by the front door, one I hadn't noticed when I came in. My name was printed neatly on the front. I tore it open, and my hands started to shake before I'd even read the first line. It was from a law firm, one I recognized from whispered conversations about high-profile clients. Sterling's attorneys. The letter was short, but brutal. If I continued spreading defamatory lies, they would sue. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. I set it down on the table, my breath catching in my throat. My knees buckled, and I slid onto the kitchen floor, the cool tiles pressing into my skin. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone rang. My sister's name lit up the screen. I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mari, you okay?" she asked, her voice a tether in the storm. "No," I admitted, my throat tight. She hesitated, then sighed. "I hate to make this worse, but Nolan's been talking. He's telling people you're unstable, that you're unfit." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "He's what?" "I heard it from someone at church. He's making it sound like you're losing your mind, like you're a danger to Izzy." That broke me. I'd been humiliated, gaslit, insulted. But this was an attack on my motherhood. My hands went cold as I clutched the phone tighter. "I can't do this," I whispered, not sure if I meant to say it out loud. "You can," she said quickly, her voice steady. "You have to, for Izzy." After we hung up, I sat there for what felt like hours, listening to the rain batter the windows. Every time I thought I'd run out of tears, more came. My body felt hollow, like I'd been scraped out from the inside. I found myself in Izzy's room again, kneeling by her bed. I picked up the rabbit she'd been holding and hugged it to my chest. That cheap, worn toy felt like the only solid thing in my life. I remembered her tiny voice at the party. "Mommy, why is Grandpa mad at me?" And just like that, my despair started to harden into something else. Back in the kitchen, I scrolled aimlessly on my phone, more out of habit than purpose. That's when I saw it. A headline about a lawsuit against Sterling's company. Fraud allegations, corruption, cracks in his empire. It felt like the first gulp of air after being underwater too long. I wiped my face and set the rabbit on the counter, next to the untouched coffee and the threatening letter. Sterling Harrison thought he could bully me into silence. He thought he could make me disappear quietly. He forgot one thing. I've been quiet my whole life. And now I'm done. So the next morning I made the call that would change everything. Not to my husband, but to a reporter. Her name was Karen Dowell, and I'd found her through a late-night search for anyone brave enough to publish the truth about men like Sterling. I expected a voicemail box, maybe a perfunctory assistant. Instead, she answered on the third ring, her voice alert but cautious. "This is Karen." I hesitated, gripping the phone tighter. "My name is Mari Harrison," I said, emphasizing the last name I'd carried like a curse. "I think I have information you'll want. About Sterling Harrison." There was a pause, then a shift in her tone. "Go on." We met a few hours later at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, one of those places that smelled like burnt espresso and had people clacking away on laptops as if the world outside didn't exist. I spotted her immediately. Short hair, glasses, a no-nonsense demeanor that made me think she'd seen and heard far worse than my story. Karen listened quietly as I laid it all out. The party, the slap, the threats, the letters. I even replayed Sterling's voicemail for her, his voice dripping with the same arrogance I'd endured for years. She didn't flinch, just scribbled notes like a surgeon preparing for an operation. When I finished, she leaned back. "You're not the first person to come to me about Sterling," she said. "His company's been under investigation for a while. Shady zoning, backroom deals. But what you're telling me, that fills in a lot of blanks." It took a moment for her words to sink in. I wasn't just another discarded in-law with a sob story. I was holding the missing piece in something much bigger than myself. We left the coffee shop with a plan. She'd connect me with a lawyer who could protect me legally, and I'd dig up anything I had on the Harrisons. I drove straight to City Hall, my heart pounding as I walked through the revolving doors. Public records are public for a reason, and I was about to make full use of that. By mid-afternoon, I had a stack of documents so thick it barely fit in my tote bag. Property transfers, zoning approvals, quiet settlements, all bearing Sterling's name. That's when I saw it. The deed to the mansion where I'd been humiliated. My eyes scanned the line 3 times before I believed it. The property was legally in my name. He'd transferred it years ago, probably during one of his legal battles, never expecting I'd notice. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time, staring at the papers. All those years he'd called me trash, made me feel like I didn't belong, and he was living in a house that legally belonged to me. By the time I got home, the rain had let up, leaving everything smelling like damp earth. Izzy was coloring at the kitchen table, humming softly to herself. I kissed the top of her head, then spread the documents across the table, the stuffed rabbit sitting beside them like a witness. This wasn't about just surviving anymore. This was about dismantling everything Sterling thought made him untouchable. That night, Karen and I spoke again, outlining next steps. Secure legal counsel. Keep my discovery quiet. Build a timeline of every humiliation, every insult, every red flag I'd ignored. If you play this smart, she said, we can control the narrative before they even know what's happening. As I filed away the documents, I reached for the rabbit and held it briefly. It wasn't just a comfort anymore. It was a reminder. This fight wasn't just for me. It was for Izzy, for her future. By the time Sterling walked into his office Monday morning, he had no idea the walls were already closing in. But his counterattack came faster and crueler than I could have imagined. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was making breakfast for Izzy, half watching her stir cereal around in her bowl, when there was a knock at the door. Sharp, businesslike. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, expecting maybe a delivery. Instead, I opened the door to a man in a suit holding an envelope. "Are you Mari Harrison?" he asked, voice flat, almost bored. "Yes." He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." I stood there for a moment, the cold air from outside creeping around my feet. The words didn't make sense at first. Served? Like I'd been drafted into a game I didn't agree to play. I shut the door and leaned against it, feeling my chest tighten. Izzy's spoon clinked against her bowl in the background, oblivious to the storm that had just walked into our house. I tore the envelope open with trembling fingers. It was an emergency custody petition. Nolan and Sterling were petitioning the court to take Izzy from me, claiming I was mentally unfit and creating a hostile environment. My stomach turned to ice. They weren't just trying to humiliate me anymore. They wanted my daughter. By the time I could breathe again, my phone started buzzing. Texts, missed calls, friends, neighbors, even a couple of old coworkers. I didn't understand why until I checked social media. There it was. Fabricated screenshots of text messages, doctored photos, all portraying me as erratic, unstable, financially reckless. Someone had carefully planted the seeds of a narrative where I wasn't a wronged mother. I was an unhinged liability. The comments stung more than the fake evidence itself. I always thought she seemed off. Poor Nolan. Imagine living with that. Gossip spreads faster than truth. especially when it comes from someone with Sterling's reach. I called Karen. "They're trying to take Izzy," I said, my voice shaking despite every effort to hold it steady. Her response was immediate. "Don't panic. This is exactly what people like Sterling do. They create chaos so you can't think straight. Don't give him that satisfaction." Easy for her to say. She didn't feel the floor giving way under her. For a while, I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stuffed rabbit Izzy had left behind when she went to get ready for school. It was the same one she clung to the night Sterling slapped her. I picked it up and held it close, breathing in the faint scent of her shampoo. I could let them win. I could give up, sign whatever they wanted, disappear quietly so Izzy wouldn't be caught in the crossfire. For one aching moment, that almost sounded like mercy. But then I remembered Sterling's smirk at the party, the way Nolan didn't hesitate to side with him. The word trash seared into my memory like a brand. And I knew mercy wasn't what this was. It was erasure. I spent the rest of the day gathering everything I had: voicemails, property records, the emails Sterling thought I'd never read. I organized it into folders, labeling each one like a soldier preparing ammunition for a final battle. That night, after tucking Izzy in, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You don't deserve to grow up thinking people like him always win." I wasn't just talking to her. I was talking to myself. By sunrise, Sterling Harrison's name would be synonymous with corruption, and I'd make sure of it. I pressed send and watched as everything I'd built in secret went nuclear. It didn't take long. Within the hour, Karen's exposé was live on every major news site in the state. By sunrise, it was on national feeds: corruption, fraud, property transfers meant to hide assets, and buried in the middle of it all like a landmine, a detailed account of Sterling Harrison striking his 8-year-old granddaughter at a public event. I stood barefoot in my kitchen, coffee cooling untouched on the counter, watching it unfold on the TV. The house was still, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Izzy's light breathing from down the hall. The camera cut to Karen, standing outside Sterling's corporate headquarters. "This morning, sources confirm that federal investigators have opened a formal inquiry into Harrison Development Group," she said, her voice steady. "Documents provided by an anonymous insider reveal extensive misconduct, including tax evasion and intimidation tactics against family members." Anonymous insider. That was me. It felt surreal, hearing my pain translated into newscaster language. Clean, precise, stripped of the years of humiliation and quiet suffering. But it was out there now. My voice couldn't be silenced anymore. At 8 a.m., the footage shifted to live scenes. Federal agents walking into Sterling's building, their dark jackets a striking contrast to the glassy facade of his empire. I imagined him in his corner office, watching the life he'd curated so carefully splinter in real time. My phone buzzed on the counter. Nolan. I didn't answer. Then a voicemail came through. His voice was panicked. "Mari, please. We need to talk. This got out of control. I didn't know it would go this far." A bitter laugh escaped me. He didn't know. He knew exactly who his father was. He'd defended him every time. Now, with their family name dragged through the mud, he suddenly wanted to play peacemaker. Another call. Another voicemail. This one from Sterling. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started." But the edge in his voice wasn't power anymore. It was desperation. Izzy padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes and holding the stuffed rabbit that had seen too much these past weeks. "Mommy, why are you watching the news?" I crouched to her level and brushed her hair back. "Because, baby, the truth matters. And now everybody knows it." I set the rabbit on the counter beside us, its frayed ears standing at odd angles. "This house is ours now," I told her softly. "And no one can take that from us again." Around noon, Karen called. "You did it, Mari," she said, her voice full of a mix of exhaustion and triumph. "He's finished. The FBI isn't just investigating, they're seizing records as we speak." I didn't feel giddy or vengeful. I felt lighter, like I could finally breathe without something pressing down on my chest. By the afternoon, Nolan came by uninvited. He stood at my doorstep, suit rumpled, tie askew, the mask of composure he always wore cracked beyond repair. "Mari, we can fix this," he said, voice pleading. "We can put our family back together." "Our family?" I repeated, steadying myself against the frame of the door. "You watched your father hit our daughter and told me to leave. That's the family you're talking about." He flinched, but I didn't give him a chance to respond. "Izzy and I are done being part of your damage control. Go home, Nolan, whatever that means for you now." For the first time, he didn't argue. He just left. By evening, the phone stopped ringing. The storm that had defined my life for years had broken, not because I survived it quietly, but because I finally fought back. I sat at the kitchen table, Izzy drawing in her notebook across from me, the rabbit between us like a witness to our survival. For the first time in years, the phone was silent, and I liked it that way.